What's up, my dudes? We're gonna be doing wheel bearings and brakes, rotors, 96 Econoline van. We got 12 millimeter on the back of these, but this side looks like 13 millimeter. So the other side was 12. And I'm gonna do this video real quick as possible. No dilly-dallying. So we got this 13 millimeter here. The other side was 12. So something's been replaced, changed. That's all right. You're gonna want to take these two bolts out first. So we're looking at the back view of the caliper with the wheel cut all the way to the left. Grab yourself a big screwdriver. We're not worried about hurting the rotor or pads. We're gonna press that caliper in. And then it'll kind of just pop off for us. So we're replacing the rotors and pads, so I wasn't worried about gouging the rotor or anything there. We could just pop these pads out with a screwdriver, just like that. Bought premium pads, so it's going to come with new hardware. So we're just going to toss these aside. If you're reusing your hardware, you bought cheap pads, clean those up real good. Don't bend them, but you should probably always go with new hardware. I'm just going to take a flathead and a hammer and pop the dust cover off. I got it loosened, that's good. Started to come out. There we go. See if I can turn this wheel for you so you can see. Dust cover's off. We got a little cotter key here. We'll bend those tabs straight on that key. So we can pull this cotter key out. Give it a little grab with some pliers. There we go. And then we take this little doohickey off. And we have a, let's see, a 1 1/8 socket on there. We're just gonna take that nut off. There should be a washer behind it to grab. Go, keep that washer nut clean. I don't care about that outer bearing falling off because we're replacing it. We got our rotor off. You can see this rotor's real rusty, nasty. It needs to be replaced. Clean that spindle off, get all that old heated grease out of there. Clean her off a little better. That's just beautiful. And I'm gonna take my wire wheel and clean up where the new hardware is gonna sit because it's real rusty. So we'll clean those off. And it's all taken apart. And then we'll press that caliper back in just a little bit more. It's not all the way in. And these slides right here in the caliper, that one's frozen in. That's no good. Oh, it started to move. All right, so we'll get that out. We'll probably have to use some pliers. We're gonna pop it out of its boot, take these out, clean them up on the wire wheel, grease them, put them back in here. So make sure these are free sliding. This one's way too stiff here, but it's coming out. So they'll get cleaned and greased. All right, guys, we got our new rotors in. Give that a little spray down with brake cleaner on the surface area. Get that shipping oil off. We got our new bearings. They came with races, but because we got a new rotor, the races are pre-installed. So we're good to go. If you're reusing your rotor, you're gonna have to pound those old races out and put them in. So we've got our handy dandy bearing packer. You don't need a bearing packer, but it helps. So we're going to start with the big bearing, the inner bearing. Put it in our bearing packer and press down to get that grease all the way through those bearings. There we go. You'll see it squirt through the sides and the top of the bearing. We'll take this extra grease, put it inside there, pull our bearing out. You'll see it squish through all the bearings. We can give it a little bit more. So it comes out the sides too. Get pressed down really hard on these. And make sure you got a bunch of shop rags because you're going to get greasy, you know. If you don't have a bearing packer, you can take a bunch of grease and just slam it in your hand so that the bearings are turning, pushing the grease in. There we go, lots of grease everywhere. We'll pack some grease on the top of here. Grab a little rag. Make sure you're using wheel bearing grease. High temperature rated stuff. And now we're going to need a new seal. So you could reuse your seal if you don't warp it, taking it off if you're reusing your rotor, but I always recommend just buying a new one. They're like $3. So pop that seal right on there. We'll just start tapping it in evenly, trying to. This one doesn't want to go. Let me grab a cone from right here. Let's see, is that one big enough? Yeah, that one's big enough. Maybe a little bigger. Probably use like a block of wood or something a little softer, but it's just a rotor seal. You just want to get that seal on there. Put your fingernail in it, make sure it's flush. It is. Perfect. Now we can flip her over. Inside or outside bearing, a lot smaller. Let's get that packed up with some grease. In the bearing packer. Flipped her sideways. Go, we need some more grease. Let me just grab my grease pail. Go. Get a little grease going on that race. Pull our bearing out. Put a little extra grease on the side. Plop her in there. We got a little grease on our shaft here because we cleaned it off nice and good on our spindle. Our hands are covered again. Covered. All right, now we're ready to put that rotor on there nice and smooth. Nice, smooth, and straight. That box of the rotor works as a work area. Got her on there straight now. We gotta clean off our old washer. Go, washer's on there. Now we got our nut. Pack some grease into the outside there. I cleaned my socket off that I used. I won't get any small pieces of dirt or anything in there. All right. Now we're all ready to check our torque specs. I'm not tightening this down, I'm just spinning the nut on. Not putting no torque on it for now. There we go, our rotor's on. After we get the job done, almost done, spray off that rotor if you got any grease anywhere. Sorry, I wasn't filming that. And adjust my camera. There we go. Put that rotor on nice and smooth. Put the washer on, made sure the bearing, outer bearing was seated. Put the washer on, spun the nut on. Let's check some torque specs. All right, back to our torque. We're gonna torque it down to 17 to 25 foot-pounds while spinning the rotor. Helps to have somebody assist you. That's going to seat the bearing. There we go. Now we're going to back it off a half turn. And we're going to tighten it to 25 inch-pounds. And that's not much more than finger tight. I just grab it by the head of the ratchet. And there we go. Now we're ready to put our cap on and our cotter key through. You just got to make sure you line it up with the little notch. There's so much grease I can't see. There we go. Now I can see it. Little booger. Go. And we move on to the next step. Alright, I've put my dust cap on here, wheel cap cover. Just tapped it on there, and of course we got the new hardware from the hardware set that came with the pads. I've put the pads in. The outside one's going to have the clip. So the pads are set into place. And their little ears. Now we got our caliper. You got to make sure we've cleaned off the slides and greased them up. Make sure they're all the way backwards so they don't hit nothing. We're going to start fitting that caliper over there. Lift up on these little tabs and it'll slide into place, just like so. Now we get our bolts started from the back. Be a little tricky to line up sometimes. Here we go, first one started. There we go. That's gonna about wrap this up. So we're gonna tighten up these bolts in the back. And then we need to prime the brake pedal. Press that brake pedal in and out slowly a bunch of times so that this piston comes out to the pads. And then give her a brake bleeding. We pushed all that old fluid up, so let's get some new fluid in there. And throw the wheel on. Take her for a test drive. Break in the brake pads. That'll about do it. Wheel bearings and brakes.